All right, so we're live on Facebook. Let me rejoin you. All righty, and hopefully people will come in as we speak. If not, they'll listen outside. All righty, my name is Valerie Leonard. I want to say good morning. I am the founder of Nonprofit Utopia. As some of you may know, this is Nonprofit and Social Good Technology Month in the month of June for Nonprofit Utopia. And we're doing this in partnership with Net Impact Chicago as well as Whipfleet. We are working with a number of nonprofits and social enterprises, helping them to figure out ways that they can better integrate technology into what they do rather than do what most of us do. We look at technology in and of itself in a silo, separate and apart from our program. So our focus for the month is to show people how to better incorporate technology into what they do, and particularly since we are going through a pandemic. So the pandemic has definitely heightened the need for us to better understand technology and how to integrate it into the work that we do. And we're really going to focus today on looking at ways that we can better do project management and work remotely. So we have for our guests today, we have Herman Hawkins. He's the Executive Director of Project Management Volunteers. And thank you so much, Sean. And he's going to tell us a little bit more about himself before he shares with us. And he is going to share with us three clips as well as, some other sage advice that he's had with, working with technology. And then after that, we're going to hear from Linda Stettler. Hey, Linda, and thank you so much for joining us. She's going to talk about low tech, high impact solutions for working remotely. She's going to share from some of her own experiences and then also reflect on a conversation that we had on yesterday. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Sean Hawkins. And Sean, if there's anything you need me to do, let me know. All right.
All right. Well, hi, everyone. I'm talking to you this morning from my home office in beautiful Vancouver, British Columbia, a long way away from Chicago. I want to start with some acknowledgements. First, to acknowledge that I'm speaking to you today from the ancestral territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations. And second, I want to acknowledge Elijah Vandergeisen, who does such a great job heading up the TechSoup operations in this part of the world. And third, I want to acknowledge that while I've been to Chicago before, your lived experience is quite different from mine. And while I'm sharing ideas with you, I hope you'll share some ideas with me too. I try to be a better listener than a talker. My understanding is that most of you are in the nonprofit sector, and maybe you call yourself a 501c, or maybe a nonprofit, or maybe a term that's gaining some currency these days more and more, a social profit organization, as opposed to a for-profit organization. And project management impacts all of us. It's all about completing projects on time and on budget and within scope. Sure, project management can be big and audacious if you're planning to fly to Mars or build the tallest building in the world, but it doesn't have to be. Completing things on time and on budget and within scope is just as valuable to nonprofits as it is to the rest of our economy. And even though project management has its roots in the construction industry and in engineering, today the real growth is in the IT sector, in healthcare, in education, and in government. It has morphed and evolved tremendously over the last number of decades. And project management can be scaled, that's what makes it so valuable for nonprofits. For most nonprofits, I mean, historically, are small to medium-sized enterprises. And today, I mean, as Victoria said, you're worried about the pandemic, but also things like lack of funding or retaining volunteers or the safety of your staff or how to transition to virtual management with people working at home, how to provide services without putting the people you're trying to help at risk, how to deliver your services in a new way. And in some cases, you're worried about your very survival. In our terms, in project management terms, those are all opportunities to take a project management approach to see your way through it. These are the kinds of challenges many, many nonprofits are facing. So I'm going to focus on just some common themes and how project management can help you manage all the good things that you do. I mean, you help people, you help communities, you help the environment. Good on all of you. 3 key project management approaches to help you be more successful in fulfilling your mission. Whatever your mission and vision is, whatever that might be, here's some tools that you can use. Well, let me tell you something about myself. In my career, I jumped between the private sector and government and academia. Mostly I was a manager, and as you progress as a manager, you have to learn about managing people. And I learned lots at university, but I didn't learn how to manage people. I tried hard to be a good manager, so I watched how some really great ones operated, the ones I really admired and respected, and I paid attention to what was working for me and what wasn't working and how I could improve. It was only after I retired that I really recognized that I took some of those manager tools for granted. I'm talking about things like pay levels, bonuses, and vacation scheduling, promotions, assignments to teams. Those were all management tools, and they were just part of my daily routine as a manager. And employees who reported to me responded to all those manager signals. When I started working, leading a nonprofit, well, I had to look in the mirror big time. My assumptions, as they say, came crashing down. Let's watch the first video clip and tell me if this is at all familiar to you. First clip, please.
Hey, Valerie, if you're talking, you need to unmute so we can hear you.
At Bambi, not a consultant or a hotline, a dedicated HR manager that you can hire for just $99 a month. Seriously, I'll craft your company policies, employee handbook, and ensure compliance. And I'll deal with the government on your behalf. We're called Bambi, and we're a new kind of HR, built and priced specifically for small business. Here's how it works.
This man right here is my great-grandfather. He's the first cat herder in our family.
Herding cats. Don't let anybody tell you it's easy.
Anybody can herd cattle. Holding together 10,000 half-wild short hairs, well, that's another thing altogether.
Being a cat herder is probably about the toughest thing I think I've ever done.
I got this one this morning, right here. And if you look at his face, it's just ripped to shreds, you know? You see the movies, you hear the stories. I'm living a dream. Not everyone can do what we do. I wouldn't do nothing else.
Nope.
Cheese job. But when you bring a herd into town, it ain't about the one of them.
Okay. Okay, I'm sorry. Sean, I am so sorry.
We're all learning as we go.
Excuse me, madam.
This
Might do the trick.
is what happens in the new Zoom world, huh?
At Caltex, our staff will do whatever they can
Thank you so much. You're welcome.
to
So
help make your life a little easier.
You can stop that one, please, Val. I've lost you.
Okay, Shawn, did you see the full video or did you see my machinations?
No.
Okay, shall I start over?
Yeah, start with the first one on the cat herder.
Okay, I'm sorry, I won't do anything in the background.
Okay, now skip ad. There you go.
This man right here is my great grandfather. He was the first cat herder in our family. Herding cats. Don't let anybody tell you it's easy.
Anybody can herd cattle. Holding together 10,000 half wild short hairs. Well, that's another thing altogether.
Being a cat herder is probably about
You might need to raise the volume.
I've ever been. I got this one this morning, right here. And if you look at his face, it's just ripped to shreds, you know.
You see the movies, you hear the stories. I'm living a dream. Everyone can do what we do.
I wouldn't do nothing else.
It ain't an easy job, but when you bring a herd into town and ain't lost a one of them, ain't a feeling like it in the world.
Okay, thank you.
All righty.
Yeah. Now you have to close that screen.
Okay. All righty, and you want the next clip or are you
Not
going to
yet.
speak on that?
Not yet.
Okay.
So I hope you got to see that herding cats video. It's a neat clip. and it's available to you on YouTube if you ever want to go back and see it. I think I saw some nodding heads out there in Zoom land.
I love it. When it came out, I just thought it was brilliant.
So what I learned was all those managerial tools and assumptions I had were gone. And I had to do something different. Now, I'm assuming most of you work with volunteers. Well, my leaders
Oh my goodness.
didn't work with volunteers. I had to scramble. And what I learned was that the best tool I had was persuasive influence. Yeah, it was somewhat familiar to what I used to do as an adjunct professor at a law school and then a business school. It wasn't about me standing in front on my pedestal and regurgitating my knowledge. It was more like inviting the students to stand up beside me and pointing to what I was seeing and asking whether they could see it too and whether it interested them. It was sharing my vision and my energy around what could be. And for some, it worked. And they caught the energy and they ran with it. For others, it didn't. And for them, it was the law of 2 feet. They had choice. They could go elsewhere. And I encouraged them to go elsewhere. So next time you're frustrated by volunteers not listening or coming and going or leaving you holding the bag without notice, think about herding cats. Show them what you see and what you're excited by and let them choose. And if they're not there, encourage them to keep searching for something that really excites them and they're willing to make a personal commitment to fulfill. It sounds trite, but good things happen when people make personal commitments to make good things happen.
Okay.
Now in project management, project start is called the initiation phase. It's called, and it's captured by a charter. So what's a charter? It's a simple document where you can write down why you're doing the project, what are the deliverables, what are the risks, if any, what are the various roles and responsibilities that need to be fulfilled on your team, and what assumptions are you making? So those are all kind of key questions that you're going to ask to write down a charter. Now, it may surprise you to learn that we all learned as kids just how valuable a charter can be. So remember back, close your eyes, Remember when we all sat around in a circle and the teacher would whisper something to one student? She would whisper it to the student sitting beside her and would go all the way around the circle. And then the last student would have to say it out loud. And it would be totally different from what it was started at. Right? That happens all the time in projects. When you talk about a project, it's like that. People can talk about it to each other. We can sit around a board table and it sounds good and people nod their heads, but they understand it differently. And a week or a month later, it comes out quite different. It muddies things up. What I learned about working with a lot of volunteers is they really value working on something that's well organized. They want to understand what the project is all about and what their role is. They need line of sight. They know they're volunteers and they just want to focus on their part. Do it well. Be a part of something bigger. If it's well organized, they're much more likely to contribute their own ideas and volunteer again, or tell their friends and family about it and encourage them to volunteer. That's the best recruiting tool you've got, is their enthusiasm. If it's a well-organized project, people who impact the project or are impacted by it, they know what's going on. Your teammates know what's going on. The organizations you're dealing with know what's going on. The community beneficiaries know what's going on because you've laid the groundwork. Well-prepared and updated charter makes a huge difference in a project, and it goes from the beginning to the end. Some people make it hard, thinking they have to have all the answers and all the details, but a charter it's a living document. At the beginning, you only put down what seems fairly certain, what you know. And as the project proceeds, you fill in the blanks, you add details. There's one element of the charter that I want to draw your attention to. And I'll ask Valerie if you'd put up the second clip.
All righty, and just bear with me.
See you again. Cheers.
Share your screen, Valerie.
Anything else?
Your screen. Okay.
Excuse me,
thank
madam. This might do the trick.
Oh,
See you again. Cheers. Anything else? Excuse me, madam. This might do the trick.
oh.
At Caltex, our staff will do whatever they can.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. To help make your life a little easier. Caltex.
That was hilarious.
So remember I said that in a charter you should write down what your assumptions are going in?
Right.
Here's a big one for nonprofits. Don't assume you know all about the problem you're trying to solve. Talk to people. Ask lots of questions. Don't try to sell them on your solution. Be open-minded about it, because what you perceive as a solution may not be seen the same way by the people you're trying to help. They may see the world quite differently than you do. Who knows? You might end up with a much better project. So be careful about your assumptions, because it may trip you up. That brings me to my final lesson. We live in a multicultural world where people speak different languages, sometimes literally and sometimes figuratively. Every project has risks, and a good project plan identifies what those risks are and what you plan to do about them. So you have choices. In some cases, you plan for alternate scenarios, like if it's an outdoor event, with you write in a provision to put up some tents and umbrellas if the weather turns bad. Sometimes you offload a risk. You can buy an insurance policy. If something happens, you're covered financially. Or sometimes you accept a risk and say, it's okay, but we're going to try to reduce the potential impact. And then there are other risks. I'll go to my last clip, please, Valerie. I'm not hearing anything.
Yes, still no sound.
No, the sound's off.
We're sinking.
There we go. Okay.
Das hier ist mein Sektor. Das hier ist das wichtigste Gerät des Küstenwächters. Das Gerät. Überlebensradar.
Mayday. Hello, can you hear us? Can you over? We are sinking.
Hello? This is the German Coast Guard.
We're sinking.
What are you thinking about?
Yeah, all these clips have been great.
Oh my goodness. I learned a little bit about assumptions in that exercise.
Yeah. So project plans, they're all about teamwork. You assign tasks, but no one should carry the whole burden on their own shoulders. That young fellow in the clip, I mean, he was trying to do the best he could. Project teams have to work together. They have to support each other. They have to balance experience and inexperience. A good team balances different perspectives and points of view. Doing good shouldn't be a test. A good project manager, their role is to organize. They're responsible for organizing and leading a project, but it's a team that completes it. It's really about managing people as much as managing the project. So there you have it. 3 quick lessons. And if you want to learn more about project management, there are so many opportunities for you. Start with the International Project Management Institute, PMI. And the Chicagoland chapter of PMI is one of the largest in the world. Check out your local colleges and universities as well, because many of them will have courses and programs. And of course, just go online. There's a lot of stuff that's oriented towards the business world. But search and you'll find some people in the nonprofit sector, like my own organization, that are specialized just working with nonprofits. So my message to you overall is that project management tools and methodologies can seriously help you be more successful at fulfilling your own missions and visions. And that's a win for everybody. The organization I'm proud to be part of has worked with about 250 nonprofits. Wow. And we know we're making a difference, one project at a time. Be safe, everyone, and thank you.
Well, thank you. Yes, indeed. Leslie, we see that you have joined us. Did you have any observations you want to share before we move on to Linda?
Good morning. I'm happy that, Valerie, you've brought together such experts in the field of nonprofit management. And at this point, I'm just listening, nonprofit development, just listening to gather the information they're presenting. And so that's all I want to say. I just really appreciate all of you that are here participating, sharing, collaborating.
Okay, thank you so much for joining us. Leslie is one of our members. Again, Shawn, thank you so much. I'm going to make sure I edit out all that other stuff before I release the video. Thank you.
In some ways, it might be worth it to leave it in just because it's a lesson to show people that things don't always run smoothly. And sometimes you have to figure out how to solve, what's going on and that you can survive it, that you can get past it and we can move on, right?
Oh.
So I think those are valuable experiences.
I learned a lesson in every clip on the spot. Okay, great. All right, so I'll leave it in. Shawn, I hope that's okay with you. If need be, we can send an edited version to you.
It's really your discretion. I just don't want to lose any audience, any participants if it's if it's redundant.
I got you. All righty. Okay, so Linda, letter A.
Okay, let me start sharing my screen, I guess. Yeah, before I do that, let me, all right, actually, we'll come over here.
Okay.
This is not what I want. Okay. I'm gonna do, I'm just, you guys can see me, yes?
Yes,
Or are
ma'am.
you seeing my desktop?
We can see you both.
Desktop or me?
Both.
Okay.
We can see you both.
Okay. So, we're gonna start through here. Before I go through, the presentation that I prepared, Valerie was also talking to me before we officially started about also discussing things about managing teams remotely. And so I'm just going to extemporaneously talk about, some of my experiences, this is off the cuff and not planned. Maybe what I'll do is I'll come over here so that you can, who I am. I've been working in nonprofits, not necessarily as a paid staff person. I've really been a volunteer. I've worked on many volunteer boards. I tried to reestablish the Organization for Women in International Trade here in Chicago. So I was the president of that for 2 years. And so my experience mostly is working on highly volunteer run organizations with shoestring budgets and trying to figure out how to do things with very, very limited budgets. And then in my work life, I've mostly earned my living in the corporate world, but in the corporate world, I've had to learn how to decentralize workflows, and it applies here because when I was working for a legal publishing company, we went through a reorganization. And so initially we were a group that all worked together. We could talk to each other all the time. So even though it wasn't necessarily working remotely, in the reorganization, what happened was many of our team members got moved to a completely different area. It wasn't all that convenient to walk, to track them down, to ask them simple questions. And the other thing that we did have one of our attorney editors start working remotely. So I do have, then I also have worked as a freelancer where I was working remotely with managers. And in my last work assignment as a contract attorney, I was helping figure out how to make it easier for a large team to work on a project. And even though I don't know that it's ever had to be done both in Chicago or Raleigh, it was always on the horizon that we might have to have people working in Raleigh on that project. So these are things that I've thought through, that I have practical experience doing. So my thoughts on this real quick, and feel free to chime in if people have questions or other concerns. First off, most of my managers, when they were going through things remotely, they just don't understand that you really, once you decentralize your workflow, you really have to think things through. Life does change, and there are things that you have to take into consideration. You can't just think that somebody that's working remotely automatically knows exactly what's going on. So you really have to think through, how do you centralize information? How do you make information accessible and visible to people so that they can see, appreciate, and understand, know what the process is of how they need to get their work done. And this really does take time, and it's a step that you can't skip. So what did that mean in a practical sense? Okay, so when we went through the reorganization at the legal publishing company, that was at an earlier phase of technology. We didn't really have Dropbox or other things like that. But so essentially what it is that we did, we got together as a team multiple times. So to go with Sean's lessons, it's important to talk to people. It's important to understand what it is that's going on. And so we would get together, we would talk to each other about what it is that needed to be done. And what we did is just set up an Excel spreadsheet to go through and list all the different steps for how we produced. In the legal publishing world, what we were doing is putting out decisions. As an attorney editor, I was writing head notes for these decisions. So we would have courts or regulatory changes come out. And so all of that information would come in. We'd have it in multiple formats. At the time, you still had paper, but there would also be electronic versions of those types of things, which meant that Jamie could access those remotely. We didn't have to worry about mailing paper copies of things to her. But this is where, so the first step that we needed to do was track all of that work that was coming in. And then we had to figure out ways where we could show when an attorney had checked out or taken one of those pieces of legislation or a court decision to go through and read through, work up, and produce the head notes, right? And then, so you have to go through and you really have to think through all the steps of your process. And and then you just figure out what types of things are available out there to turn that into a visual, something that's visual something that's shareable, and something that everyone can update as they either take on a task or complete a task, and who it gets passed on to. So it's very important that you think about these types of things. And if you do that upfront work, you'll find out that your work life can run so much more smoothly. I think you'll find if you do it this way, initially what you'll have is lots of meetings, and you just need to work through those issues. But at a certain point in time, once people are comfortable with this, you don't need as many meetings. You don't need to touch base as often. And what you'll find is when people have a visual reference to know who's doing what when, as a manager, you can feel less anxious because you'll have visual proof, visual confirmation that the steps of your process are getting done. And your coworkers will be able to know and see how it is that they're contributing. Is this a fun process to go through? The answer is no, because when you go through a reorganization in the corporate world, and especially with nonprofits in our current environment, the first thing that people think is that they're about to lose their job. And so they're fearful, they're apprehensive. Oftentimes, they do not understand why they have to change what has worked so well in the past. And so these are all things that you have to take into consideration about how people are feeling. And so when this came up, I would say, these are our choices. You can either do nothing and let corporate dictate the terms of this change to you, or we can work together and we can build a process and a plan that really actually works for what it is that we need to accomplish and what we need to achieve. And we can actually create, manage, and successfully create change that really helps us get things done. So and the upside, when I left CCH and when I came back a little bit later, what I found out was that what it is that we had created for our team, our people loved it. The process to get there wasn't always fun and it wasn't always smooth. But when we went through that process and when we talked to each other and when we created something that worked for us, people were really happy about that. And when other teams, sections of corporate saw what it is that we were doing, they adopted our methodology. So being the first isn't fun, but it is something that you can do. It is something that you can achieve. And I have this on another slide. Now that I'm also trying to, Valerie knows I've been trying to put together a web application for incredibly volunteer-heavy nonprofit organizations. And so one of the things about working in the tech world, learning coding and other types of things, the tech approach to life is really helpful in these times, because when they talk about iteration, what they're talking about is working together, coming up with a plan, right? Executing that plan, and then getting back together and saying, did this actually do what we thought it would do? Are we accomplishing what we set out to do? And if the answers are yes, then you can move on to the next step. And if the answers are no, then you need to go back through and rethink what it is that you're doing. It does take time. But what this means is that it prevents you from building things out that really will fail in the long term. And if you approach this as well, this way, it can really help you. So you think through, you come up with a plan, you put it into place, and then you get real world results, then you meet, and then you modify what it is that you're doing if you don't like the results that you're getting. And it's a process, it takes time. And all of these are new skills for many people. They're skills that you need to work on. They're skills that you need to practice. And the more you do it, right, just like with exercise or other types of things, the more you do something, the better you get at it, the more automatic it becomes, the more muscle memory that you gain. And so at a certain point in time, things become automatic, and you will get there. But at times it can be incredibly difficult, and it can be very, very frustrating. So I'll just ask Valerie, how did I do for not? Yeah, I can't hear you.
I'm sorry. You did well. Very
Okay.
well. That was impromptu, huh? That's
Yes.
awesome.
Yes. Well, it's also lived experience. So in some ways, like this is burned into my brain because, some of these experiences, aren't pleasant at the start. And the other benefits of these types of things is that shared pain is a bonding experience. Shared pain and coming out the other side of it really is something that can increase, morale. It can increase trust in your coworkers. So if you do this right and you set up the right conditions, you can have like an even more fulfilling work experience. That's just my lived experience of things. So it's worth it to go through the pain. Leslie, do you have any questions for me?
Yes, I do. Thank you for your presentation.
Sure.
How do you decide in midstream how to modify the approach in terms of deciding where the organization should go? Are there some telltale signs of things that you do for that? What has been your experience in terms of that, please?
Okay, so I'm a lawyer, and lawyers' answers are always to these types of questions. It depends. So, can I ask you, what type of organization are you involved with, and what are you trying to do?
Okay, currently I'm discovering and exploring what I should be involved in. I've been in most of the time in government management and planning, in economic and community development. So because I'm no longer there, I wanted to see how I can shift into nonprofit work. And so I'm in the very beginning stages of looking around to see what I should be involved in. And I've been asked now to look at working at a top level with a organization that's beginning to start out that will have a wide breadth of working in Illinois community development. So I'm trying to make a decision I should do that and what's involved on the onset in terms of what I should look at. So this is very preliminary in terms of where I am right now.
Okay,
so
fair enough.
Yes.
You know what I'm going to do? I'm actually going to come through here to my, in order to answer your question, I'm going to skip to the very end, okay? And I'm just gonna think through, and we can collaborate as well. So these are different examples of types of things, right, that nonprofits do, or even government programs do, right? So all of your experience can apply in the nonprofit world. The nonprofit world has quirks, because if you're dealing with volunteer heavy things, to build on what Shawn was saying and to build on what I'm saying, if you have a volunteer heavy organization, it's really critical to have visual cues, especially right now, so that everybody knows what's going on. Because otherwise you'll have people assuming somebody else is doing something and they're not, or you're going to have people assuming no one's doing it, and you're going to have 2 or 3 people doing the same thing, and other things falling through the cracks. When I was initially putting this together, I was really thinking through like delivering food to seniors, okay? Because in COVID right now, one of the big things that we're seeing is that seniors are particularly susceptible. And so some of the needs that people, nonprofits, are seeing is that rather than having seniors expose themselves more greatly in grocery stores or pharmacies, right, what you want to do is let them stay at home and have things delivered to them. But in many areas of, of our city, of our state, we also have other issues. So let's say you're in a wealthier suburb, right? You still have seniors that are better off staying at home and having things delivered to them. So in a wealthier community, what you most likely have are people that have resources and time, and they can go out, they can actually get a grocery list from a senior, go out, actually purchase those items, and they can consider that a donation, right? And so if you're a nonprofit and you're saying, I want to deliver food to seniors, that is a perfectly acceptable way to deliver food to seniors. But there are downsides for these types of solutions to these types of problems. So some of which is conditions can change for people rapidly right now. And so just because you have a job today doesn't mean you have a job tomorrow. And if you lose your job, you might lose your volunteer, that can go out and do the shopping for a particular senior. So then there are other ways to accomplish the same goal, right? So what you can do is approach delivering food to seniors like an expense account for a business, right? Where what you can still do is, but it requires a little more planning and organization. You can still get grocery lists from seniors. And then what you would do is people would go out and buy the groceries, and then they would submit the receipts to be reimbursed by the nonprofit organization. So this way, what you are insuring against is that you lose your volunteer because of financial difficulties. Does that make sense? Follow me? But what it means is that now you have other logistical things that you have to think through, like accounting, right? You have to go through and think about, how do you make sure that you are capturing those receipts? How do you make sure that you are getting payments, out to those people for doing the services that you want them to provide? And you need that as a nonprofit to show, these are because it's a donation amount, right? It's a donation amount, or it's a service, right? It's a line item. If you're taking money out of a grant, right? You need those receipts. You need to be able to prove that you're actually delivering the services that you're delivering. Okay. So now let's take it to another level of complexity. Let's say somebody, you have people that have time but do not have the financial resources, and you have a lot of seniors to deliver things to.
Right.
So another way to approach this same thing is you might need to, instead of getting a grocery list from your senior, you might need to say, what it is that we're going to do is we're going to create our own grocery list of standard items. Like, this is what it is that we are going to do. This is, what it is that people are going to get on a daily or a weekly or a bi-weekly basis, right? And so if you do it this way, the nice part of this is that you're standardizing the delivery. You can do bulk purchasing, right? But now what you also have to think through is you have additional volunteer work, right? You'll have to get people together. Like, you can do centralized purchasing, but now what you'll have to think through is, how do I tell people who are volunteers where to go to help us put together boxes? How do you assemble these items for delivery, right? So this is where it's the same service, right?
Yes.
It's just being done in a different way. And then you have other accounting that you have to think about, because now you have to have your budgeting for how are you going to go through and fulfill those bulk orders.
Yes.
Right. How do you do the bulk purchasing? Where's that money coming from?
Right.
And then what you have to do is figure out getting people to pack things. Then you have to figure out how do you prove that this food got packed, right?
Right.
And then you have to prove that the food got delivered. So at every step of the way,
Yes.
if you change the parameters of your program, there are just new things that you have to take into consideration. All of these things are solvable. All of these things are doable, but you just have to think about who your clients are, who your volunteers are, whether or not if this is a short-term solution, and it's okay that if people can only really commit to doing it for 3 months, that's fine, because maybe the need for delivering food goes away after 3 months. Right now, I think it's a longer term thing. The other thing is that you might need to approach this such that you start out with one model so that you can build your proof, get your evidence, be able to go through and say, we know how to provide this service. We can actually, use money wisely and deliver food to seniors. We've been doing it this way, but what we want to do is move to a bulk purchasing model, in order to be able to expand, the number of volunteers we can, take advantage of, and to provide more, better, higher quality food to more seniors and on a more regular basis, and ensure that it's done on an ongoing basis.
Okay. With the
and then, sure, go ahead. You have a question?
Oh, excuse me. Would the volunteers in this situation be reimbursed for their mileage? Now, are they totally volunteering across the board and they're paying for their own mileage and using their cars and what have you, their own personal cars for this? Is that what you have gotten to help out in terms of volunteers? Are they doing it totally?
What we're seeing is all of this. I personally think there's a number of models out there. So there, and it really does depend on where you live, what kind of resources you have available, and how great the need is. So, and I do think that when you talk in the Chicago area, in your wealthier or more affluent suburbs, I think it's easier to do that total donor model or the reimbursement model. In certain neighborhoods, it's just not feasible. And another way, another way of conquering the same type of issue, rather than doing reimbursements, would be to buy gift card, like Visa prepaid debit card,
that's a good idea.
Something where what you can do is give that to your volunteers, and that way, and then ask for the receipt. So that's another way of doing this. So, you can see here that I'm thinking this is how you think things through on the fly.
Okay.
And as another example, the other thing that I was thinking about, if you want to add other layers of complexity to this, in certain areas, what we also need are summer jobs for youth. So one of the other ways that you can create this type of program is to also say, not only is this a service delivering food to seniors, it's a youth employment, it's a summer youth employment program. And then you might have other avenues of grant money to give you. And then you have our, an employed workforce that might be steadier, more reliable. And then But the complexity of doing that as well is that now you not only have to build your evidence and support for making sure that you delivered food to seniors, but you're also going to have to think through how to prove that you're probably going to have to show that you're not only employing kids, but you're giving them useful skills. You're, so that and you're showing how you're actually building up, career paths for them.
Right.
Right.
Exactly. In terms of being in the management process of assembling, and that can be considered to be a skill and developed into to managing the packaging and what have you.
Exactly. Exactly.
That could be considered a management skill.
So you can see where, as you think through things, you can have this one program operate in multiple different ways.
Yes.
And based on a conversation that we were having yesterday for another presentation, she mentioned also things like the digital divide and other types of things. So when I was going through, I was doing things in Google Forms and other things to show how you could kind of low-tech mimic, Instacart or Uber Eats, just using free Google tools. And if you want to see that, we can, I can show you that, but this is going long. and just walking through this. Sure, not a problem, because what I was getting, the feedback I was getting yesterday was that this is more of the avenues that people are struggling with. So one of the ways, just with delivering food to seniors, so now we can deliver food to seniors, we can employ youth for the summer and possibly beyond. And then the other thing that you can do to conquer the digital divide is when you hire these, teenage workers, one of the things that you can do is give them a mobile phone and mobile service. And say, if you commit to delivering food and working in this program for X number of weeks, you will get this phone, right? While you're working in the program, you'll have access to it, and we'll give this to you. And you can use this for other things. But you can also structure a program to where if you can tell the people participating in it, if you complete the whole program, the other thing that you get besides your payment is that you will get your mobile phone and cell service for a year or whatever. And what that does is now add another device to a household that may desperately need that. If you're talking about a home that may not even have a device at all, just adding one phone to a home can make a huge difference. If you're talking about a home where you have 4 children all needing access to something, at the same time in order to do schoolwork, adding a second phone means that you only have 2 kids that have to, right? So these are all, so some of the opportunities that COVID opens up is if you have some imagination and you think through some of these things, you can create the same program to deliver the same services in multiple different ways. And you can do it successfully, and you can accomplish all of those goals. But the more complexity, the more people, the more types of people that you add when you go from only volunteers that you don't have to pay, but you only have to schedule their time, to an employee model. Then now you have payroll. Now you have, withholding taxes. Now you have, so you just have other things that you have to think through. But especially in certain areas of our city or our surrounding suburbs, you can see where the benefits of doing that work can really pay off. And so now you're not just delivering food to seniors, you might be a more comprehensive economic development program for an area.
Yes.
So that's one way to it.
All right, Linda.
Do you have any
have we
comments,
Oh yeah, have we exhausted your slides? Did we cover everything on your presentation?
A lot of this, you know, a lot of this people can just read through.
Okay.
So there are more bullet points.
Okay.
And I have my email here on the, to be honest with you, like I could give you my phone number, but I really do not answer calls from numbers that I don't recognize.
Right. I get it.
So I'm not going to give that out, but feel free. Like this is a PDF version of this, so I can email this to Valerie, and you can send that around to people. And you know, feel free to email me. You know, the point of Valerie told us the point of this program today was to just give people ideas about how to think through the problems that they're facing and what kind of opportunities they might have available to you. So if you have, you know, if you want to brainstorm something more specific, feel free to email me, ask me questions. If you take the job, or if you find a different job, and if you want to think through what low-tech, low-cost solutions are out there to help you accomplish your goals, you can email me and we'll brainstorm and we'll just kind of think through a simple plan for you. That applies for anybody that watches the recording, you know, or is watching on any of the broadcast services that may not have the ability to ask questions.
All right. Awesome.
Thank you so much. Appreciate that.
Sure.
Well, I came in late after he started, and that's why I didn't feel as though I could speak in terms of what I thought about, because I didn't see the total comprehensive presentation. But I'm gonna look through the recording later on and reflect on that. I appreciate you, Valerie.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate you too, Leslie. Thank you for joining us. Linda, thank you so much for the presentation. I'll make sure that when I get it, I include it in our little toolbox. This is very, very helpful. And I appreciate your being able to, you know, just speak on the fly about, you know, some of the situations that you've had. It's been really, really helpful. And before we go, I guess I have one question, maybe two. The first one is, what are some of the ways that you maintain accountability? I think that's a little bit more difficult when you're working remotely. Are there any systems in place or any recommendations that you would share?
That's some of what it is that I'm talking about. Making something visual, something that's accessible to everybody, right? It can be a Google Sheet, it can be a Google Doc, it can be Slack, it can be, there are a number of ways to achieve accountability. So unfortunately, it kind of depends on the situation that you're in. And so, but probably the easiest, fastest, cheapest way is to think through what an Excel spreadsheet would look like. Go through, think through the steps of your process, who does what when, and create an Excel spreadsheet that can be, you know, shared with everybody. And that way, as people complete tasks, do steps in a process, they can leave their initials and a date, because that's the way that you know. The other ways of accountability are, you know, so in the delivering food example, the accountability aspect is submitting your receipt or taking a picture to prove that food was delivered, right? So photographic evidence can be really helpful. So it goes back to, you have to think through about what it is that you're working on, what you're trying to accomplish, and then what is the best way to visually show accountability for what it is that you're doing.
Awesome. And then the second question, I think you may have answered it, but I guess this will just be in summary. So did you find yourself changing procedures per se, or did you just document the procedures more, if that makes sense?
I think it's a combination of both. And there are some things, I think there may have always been like unsaid processes when you're working in an office, because once you finish something, you can go over to somebody and say, hey, this is done, you know, you give it. So it's an unsaid process where what you're doing is physically handing something off to somebody else. So that the challenges are that is so ingrained, you don't necessarily realize that that's a step in a process. Does that make sense? Like, well, that's just what I do on a daily basis. But what you need to think about is that you need to reinterpret what's going on there as a step in the chain of how work gets done. And then you need to figure out how to either represent that in Excel, how to create different Slack channels, or you know, a group collaborative document. All of those things can work, but you just need to go through and kind of maybe start by visualizing your day and just think, what do I do? And then you have to think through, what is the process, and or what processes am I a part of? And then to think through how you do that differently in a remote world, because this is going to go on for a while.
Okay, that was really, yeah, that was very helpful.
Okay.
All right, thank you so much. We are over time, and I think I need to wrap this up. I can't thank you enough, Linda. Can't thank you enough, Leslie, for joining us. This has been very, very, very helpful. And
I agree, to me as well. Thank you for presenting it.
all right.
Oh, sure. And like I said, you know, you can reach out to me. This is my personal email. You can reach out to me if you have specific questions that you want help thinking through. And if you want to talk on the phone, that's fine. So long as I know what your phone number is, I will answer when you call it. Thanks.
Oh, thank you. All righty. So I'm going to sign off now, and I will see you guys on the other side.
Have a great day.
All right. You too.
Have a great day, both of you. Thank you. And thanks to Shawn as well.
All right. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.